Okay, welcome to another exciting episode of the Bud Rebel Show, a podcast like no other, because not only do we have interesting guests, someone who's very young, we're going to have very shortly. We have also strange facts. We have things I hate, which is always fun. We have some ideas to make you money and some ideas that actually will make you money. And we always try to end with a happy note at the end. Today I have a guy that's young, at least in name, and hopefully in spirit. His name is Mr. Bob Young. Hi, Mr. Bob Young. How you doing there?
I'm fine, thank you. My spirit is alive, let me put it that way.
Well, that's great. That's great. So I think, yeah, by the way, I'd love to get your story, your own story, but I got to go into the interesting story behind your story also, is that you have a brother that people might have heard of his music somewhere, Mr. Neil Young. And I mean, growing up, what in that family, is everybody an artist in the family, or is anybody not? Anybody just a doctor?
Well, there are other artists in the family and various parts of the family. My father was a writer and wrote and published 35 or 40 books in Canada. And Other members of the family are involved in artistic things too. These days, my sister, Astrid, is one of them. And obviously my brother, Neil. And I am too, through the writing of this book, Mind Golf, The Troubled Genius of Mo Norman. And uh, at this stage of my life, it's quite interesting. I've always liked to write. And because I was surrounded by writers in Canada, and not just my father, our family friends were writers, and became very well known and successful writers, as a matter of fact. And then Neil went from Canada to California when he was a teenager.
So wait, so you start out, so your father is a writer and your mother, is she artistic or in that way?
Actually, she was artistic. She edited all of my father's books.
Oh, interesting.
Essentially,
And
uh,
what kind of books does your father write? Did he write?
he wrote fiction, nonfiction. You'd have to run his name is Scott Young,
Scott
and
Young. Okay.
he wrote a broad array of things, including novels. One of them, what was it called? Murder in a Cold Climate. There was some serious discussion about a motion picture being made out of that. I think it was Sigourney Weaver was
Ah,
interested, and it didn't happen. However, it was interesting. And other people, family friends of ours in Canada, names that would be known in Canada, Farley Mowat, Pierre Burton, all were widely published and recognized. And when television came along in the 1950s, after the Second World War, they became feature creatures on national television. So their writing then expanded because everybody got to know them on television also. My father is a good example of that. He wrote some books about sports too, hockey in particular. And when television came along, he did the intermission interviews on Hockey Night in Canada, which was broadcast by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation nationally. So all of a sudden, there he was. I was a kid in school when all that happened. Now
so
I'm not a kid in school. I'm 81.
so when
Really
you're talking
tough.
about, so you're a young man and your father being author, you must have taken a lot of time away from like raising kids. Writing is a very large pursuit, takes a lot of time. Did you have
Yeah.
to spend with you growing up, you and your brother and so forth?
Well, when we were young, I was 6 and Neil was, I guess, 3.5 or something like that. We moved to a little village in Ontario called Omemee, Omemee. And My father had been an officer in the Navy in the Second World War. So he bought a house. My parents bought the house in Omemee, and it had 3 stories, and the attic was where my father wrote. So he would go up to the attic of the house, and that was his office. And uh, and then the bedrooms were on the second floor and bathroom, and then the living room, kitchen, and dining room were on the main floor. So he could actually, have privacy up there when he was trying to write. And that's what he did. We'd hear his typewriter,
The old typewriter, yes.
little
Working
computers,
all the time.
typewriter, or whatever they were called. They made a lot of noise. And so that's how he did that. I mean, and so we were all there. And in that little town, there was only about 415 people or something. It had its own hockey team, its own baseball team, and everybody went fishing in the spring and summer, and we played hockey on the pond above the mill in the winter. There was a local mill. It was local mixed farming. Was
Hmm.
We grew up. Everybody was growing their own food in their own gardens. It
Wow.
was real organic. You
Yeah,
didn't have to go to the health
that's
food store to buy this stuff.
just right to start, yeah.
When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time in the garden pulling weeds out. And so we grew our own food, and a lot of it you could keep all winter, depending on what you grew. Root vegetables, stored over the winter, hung in there, squash and potatoes and other stuff. And now people are starting in that same little village. They're starting to make gardens again.
Oh, interesting.
Probably to keep the price of food down a little bit.
That might help a little bit. That's definitely true. So you then, you and your brother, I guess what did you do like after school? Well, tell us about it, what happened with your life and his life and how everything transpired after that.
Well, we moved from that little village and to a place near Toronto called Pickering. And Neil went to school there. So did I in the high school. And when we left there, that's where I started playing golf, actually. We moved to a house right across the street from a golf course. And I was fortunate there was a golf professional there, Wilson Patterson, who was actually also a school teacher. And he was very encouraging about me playing golf. That's how I got into it. And I played on all the amateur, junior golf tournaments, and I just got better and better. And eventually I became one of the best amateurs in the province of Ontario. And eventually I joined the Canadian PGA.
Oh,
And through that activity of tournament play that I got to know Mo Norman. Murray Norman's his correct name. And he was and is to this day, his mystique is growing, as a matter of fact, I've noticed. He is the only individual, he and Ben Hogan are viewed as the finest strikers of golf balls ever in the game.
hmm.
There are a lot of very good players out there, but those two guys had it figured out. And I hit hundreds of thousands of golf balls with Mo Norman because we were friends. We had private practice area in Florida near a little place called New Smyrna Beach on the Atlantic coast. Players from off the tour who knew where we practiced, who could find us, would show up occasionally. And that was interesting. Some of those guys, I mean, they're really good, obviously, or they wouldn't be playing on the PGA Tour. And that was some time ago, late 70s, early 80s.
Right.
To this day, Mo Norman and Ben Hogan are revered as ball strikers.
That's wild. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And when you get out of school, you became a professional golf player, I guess you said at that point. And how
Mhm.
long and that was your career for how long was that for?
Well, I never, the playing the game was what I was interested in. So I played it. I played the original version of the Canadian Tour, which was put
Oh,
together uh, by people in the game who wanted to see that happen. They coordinate a series of tournaments of the provincial opens across the country so that the dates were consecutive, and in between them there'd be the odd pro amateur tournament someplace. So that's what we did. We were playing for nickels and dimes, but
oh,
that was
so
the beginning of it. And it was good. And I eventually I played in tournaments in the North Florida PGA in Florida. I played in uh, across Canada. I played in Australia. It was very
it's a
interesting.
good way. It's a good way to travel. If it's a nice way
Yeah,
to travel.
really.
It's
Meet a
really
lot of
interesting.
interesting people.
And during that period of time, I guess your brother was starting to be a bigger musician in the I guess the folk music area, and you guys stayed close through all this time when as growing up. Or did any distance? How do you guys handle that with the fame and everything like that as a couple?
Well, I mean, it was all of a sudden there it was. I just talked to Neil a little while ago this afternoon. He was in the studio probably in LA someplace or Malibu. And we'll talk again tomorrow. We're having a Zoom call that we did is being edited into 10 or 15 minutes of stuff that'll go on my website and on Neil Young Archives. That's it. He and I talking quite a bit about what goes on or went on in the game of golf. And
He played golf too. He's a big golfer too, I guess.
he did. I mean, we all played because our parents played golf. So Neil and I both played golf when we were kids. And when our parents were divorced, my brother and my mother went to Winnipeg, which is where she was from.
Mhm.
And then I would visit them. And that's where Neil started playing music.
In
It was
Winnipeg.
with his first band called the Squires.
Mhm.
And then he played local community centers and anything else where his band could get make $50 or $100 or whatever they paid them in those days. And then he went from Winnipeg to Toronto to Yorkville, which was the hippie center of the city of Toronto in the late 60s. And then he went to California. And then Buffalo Springfield formed and became what it became. And then when it dissolved, Neil played, and the other guy, Stephen Stills. I mean, I knew all of those people when all that was happening. Actually, it was a very interesting social scene,
Mhm.
and it's in Toronto, in Yorkville, because a raft of people that were nationally known were playing in coffee houses. They were playing their own songs. They had a guitar in their songs, and that's what they did for a living. Joni Mitchell's a perfect example of that. I knew Joni way back there, I guess in whenever it was, late 60s, 1970, 71, 72. She was playing, there was a folk club called the Riverboat Coffee House in Toronto. Neil played it, Joni played it, John Prine, who you undoubtedly know of, Steve Goodman.
So
Uh,
they all like before
all
the label, this before like the labels had controlled as much, I guess. There's a little bit more of I guess, a local scene, and you can grow from there. I guess his big break came with I mean, I'm more of an '80s thing. I guess when he was in Crosby, Stills, and Nash too. They were that was the big thing that hit. When was it? When did you say, oh my gosh, my brother's really famous? When did that
well,
happen?
that happened when Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. That was big, no question about it. International. Some people thought, looked at CSNY as the North American Beatles.
Mm.
That was a comparison or a comment. I know the comparison's a fair word. They're two different bands, but they did what they did, and they were recognized.
And how during that time were you guys close when this whole thing was?
Oh yeah, I mean we were always in touch. Um, Neil came to Toronto once in a while, on the road, and let's see, one summer, I think it was 1971 or two, to the Mariposa Folk Festival, was held on Toronto Island, and Joni came too, and I had they played. A couple of friends of ours, Marie McLaughlin and Bruce Coburn, stood aside and let Neil and Joan play this play at Mariposa, played in their time slot because a lot of people wanted to see them. And that happened. It was an interesting Mariposa, believe me, a lot of controversy over that
Mm.
in those days. There was a faction that did not support the star system. So here is this Mariposa Folk Festival, and the people who ran it, who had put a lot of energy in it, was really good. Mariposa was great, and they didn't support the star system. So there was a meeting in their command trailer when Neil and Joan were there, and this friend of ours in Toronto, Bernie Finkelstein, who managed Murray McLaughlin and Bruce Coburn, Neil and we had helped them. When I say we, my brother and his management company, Lookout Management, had assisted them, and so they very politely said, "Look, we know everybody wants to hear you guys play, so we'll give you our time slot today. So they did that. And the question about supporting the star system came up by way of someone on the Mariposa committee saying to me, we don't support the star system. But for some reason, I said, how many of the artists playing this thing, it's a 3-day deal, have got record contracts? Well, almost all of them. I said, well, once you got a record contract, you got no control over how many million people might buy the record and turn you into a star, whether you wanted to be or not. And that was what was really happening. But it was a fascinating time frame. And my brother and I always, were in touch. When he went to California, I visited down there in the mid-60s, and then at other times.
Yeah,
And
in those days, things were a little bit more quite wild and crazy with all the things going on. And did he stay pretty sane during those times of the 60s?
well, he did, yeah. I mean,
I guess on a,
there was a lot happening. There's no question about that.
and he
I
was
mean,
in the real, and I mean, there's a lot of drugs and this and that. I mean, he stayed okay. Wasn't any,
well, there was the emergence of the marijuana trade and hashish, which was basically, it gave the hippie generation an interior economy because of the amount of money flowing around in it. They didn't need, I remember hearing the phrase, and you might look it up if you did the research and find people commenting, we don't support the establishment. Well, they had their own interior economy to some degree because of the marijuana hash trade. And that was a fact. And then it grew into the big empire that has now been, well, in Canada, it's legal.
yeah, it's
Here,
in a lot of places in New York, in the
United States, it's starting to get there.
Yeah,
I
you can
keep
smell it all over the place. Trust me. And I was never a big fan.
all the politicians eventually, they look at it and they see the potential tax revenue.
Yeah,
And at least they can recognize a dollar sign when they see it. So it attracts their attention. And a lot of those people, baby boom, they know what marijuana is because they grew up, it was everywhere. It
right.
still is.
I'll tell you one thing. I was the one guy, Bob, that didn't try it, and everybody in my suite did it. I remember watching one of my suite mates every day would stare at the TV laughing. The only problem is the TV wasn't on. So like it just to me, make you feel like to me it was a very dopey thing to do. So I never did that. I had my drinks once in a while. But I was the one person that listened to Nancy Reagan. So in those days, and they said, when you give it at that point, about with the drugs and you give a bullet to a gangster, I just didn't want to do any of that. So I never got involved in it, but everyone around me was doing it. It was in the 80s. Mine was the 80s. A lot of people in college were doing it. So, and
Yeah.
what's
Did you did in your generation, were there a lot of people that ever take up the game of golf? I mean, it has
yeah, I think a lot of people, but that golf is still, an incredibly popular sport. What did you do after golf? Did you play golf throughout your entire life, or what other
I
activities?
still do. I went out and hit some balls at a local range here. I'm in South Carolina right now,
Right.
and I was in Florida in the winter, and I'm headed a slow rate of speed back up north. I have friends here in South Carolina, so I stopped to see them, and I went out today to a local golf course and hit some balls. Yeah, I do it. I like it. It's good for you. I mean, for me, it's there isn't every muscle in your body gets used, so it's excellent exercise, and I like it for that reason. And it's something I like doing anyhow. I got really good at it when Mo Norman and I spent years and years and years together. I got very good at it, and I kept notes. I always liked to write, so I wrote. And I never really tried to sell the writing or anything, not just golf, other stuff too. But I liked the writing. I liked the activity of it, of watching what was going on and feeling what I wanted to feel about it and writing it down. And I wrote down stuff about golf and I kept it, all the notes handwritten. And I wanted, I knew just one of these days, maybe I'll sit down and put all this together and create a book out of it. So eventually that's what I did. And now I'm going to write another one.
The book is on golf. We're going to find out more about the book on golf in a moment and some strange facts when we come right back.
Okay.
Okay, we're back again. I got some strange facts for you, pulled out right at this moment. There was a problem with Volkswagen at one point. They had a big fine and they had to get rid of a whole bunch of Volkswagens. And to this day, I believe there's Volkswagen dumping grounds all across the country where thousands of Volkswagens are kept. They call them Volkswagen dumping grounds. Did you hear that?
I've heard of it, but I don't know where any of them are.
And there's some of them are as big as some in Texas, they're all over the place. I don't know why people don't steal those Volkswagens. I mean, they can still use them. They're not using them. I don't know. They just dumped all over the place because of a big violation. It's a very strange story. I got another one about in Alabama. There was a town in Alabama where instead of getting rain or snow, it rained eels from the sky. And it's a phenomenon that happens every once in a while. It's one of the birds, but this phenomenon where the eels would come in town and hit people. And luckily they buried them. Anyway, I don't know what atmospheric conditions, but I tell you, if I saw that, I would definitely think we're at the end of times. That would definitely freak me out if I saw eels flying in the sky. Tell us a little bit more about your book. What's it about? How's it any different than any other golf book?
Well, it isn't an instructional book, although there's things in it that anybody playing golf could use. But it's about my experience with Mo Norman, and there is a lot in there about ball striking, about especially the mental construct that drives the physical action. The physical motion of a golf swing that's pure is actually fairly simple once you understand what it is. A lot of things that are great are simple when you understand them and mysterious until you do understand it. However, the mental setup of the image of the shot to be is critical to learning how to swing a golf club properly, because you've got the image of what you want to see happen in your mind. How that image is constructed is an interesting exercise, not complicated. And to give you an example, and it's mentioned in my book, a jewelry designer whose name is Jimmy Merck, I spoke to on the phone one day, and he's a friend of the publicist who handles, who arranged this discussion with you and me. Bergetta Tarmarcio, her name is. At any rate, Jimmy Merck plays golf 2 or 3 times a week or something like that, and he shoots in the low 90s, 91, 2, 3, 4, which is about 20 over par, sometimes a little more than that. So he said, "What do you think I should do?" I said, "Look at Jimmy, when you go out there to play the next time, the ball in front of you, sitting on the fairway or on your tee, put it precisely at the destination point where you want it to wind up. Then look up in the air and you'll sense where the ball would have to get to in order to fall on that destination point that you've selected. And then your eyes come back to where you are. You'll feel it. You see the apex of the flight where the ball begins its descent. You feel it. It registers. You find it with your eyes, but you feel it. If you pay attention, you notice you feel a sensation. I learned to keep that feeling and then hit the ball. Well, he went out the next time he played and he shot 80 and he made 4 birdies and shot 80.
Wow.
Amazing. Then when I talked to him after that, he said, "I've never been able to do it that well since." And I said, "Well, what are you doing? Are you trying to figure out why that works?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Don't do that. Just do what you were doing, and eventually it will come to you what's going on. But don't try to sit there and figure out why that energy that you've conjured up with your mind, with your eyes and your feeling, why it works. Just keep doing it, and eventually you'll get used to it, and you'll keep doing it." And
It's an interesting thing. It's like a spiritual journey almost.
that's right.
Which is, you know what, I'm gonna bring up something I wouldn't even think about right now. We do on a show, we talk about aspects of what we want in presidential leadership, not the candidates right now, but what we want. And it actually brings up a point. I do want a presidential candidate or want leadership that has some type of spiritual root in them, not the type of person that just doesn't have that. I think that's important. And when I mean spiritual, I was discussing this with my son. I said somebody who has faith, true faith, doesn't have to wear, like some people wear clothes, some eat food, whatever. But to me, to have true faith means that you believe that you're not the king of the world. You're here for a limited time, that there's a purpose for your reason to be here. That you make mistakes and you have to know that you are forgiven as long as you try to do a path of righteousness. So to me, you want somebody who's humble, but at the same time has spiritual faith that they can push forward in difficult times. What do you think about that?
I think that's a good idea. I mean, it's something that would be very useful now in a lot of places on this planet. When you look around the planet Earth, there's a lot of uproar in a lot of
Yeah,
directions. But the idea of having a national leader who has a spiritual, as an emissary, so to speak, that grasps the fact that there's a bigger picture to the fact that all these people exist and this situation exists and this planet exists and has bears that in mind. Most of those kind of people may go off by themselves and contemplate their creation and their part in the universe. But a government leader, somebody running for office, who can get the message out there that they see and realize that there's more to the picture than the price of oil, money, transportation methods, and pharmaceutical drugs, all the things that people buy with money. Money and time seems to control the motion of a lot of people, and yet, compared to what you're suggesting, the spiritual side of the thing seems like it gets lost, doesn't it? It isn't raised. People go to churches, I can appreciate that. They're looking. But what are we getting? What we're getting is what we see when we look out there right now. And it's not a pretty picture in a lot of places. But I like what you say, a spiritual leader or a government, a candidate for office.
that has that
Who,
faith, that type of faith. I was also going to talk about the issues, and one of the issues I think that I haven't addressed and how it solves is education. I mean, we have such an interesting thing about teaching education to me, things that are not as significant for young people. They should be learning how to, like you were showing about agriculture, learning the basics about how to raise, how to monies, how to save monies, how to spend monies, how to invest monies as your own for your own personal thing. They should be learning about emotionally how to deal with issues a bit. When things happen in life, they should have some type of mental balance on it, plus math and English and science. And they drift to these other topics and they're not focusing on the basic things that children need to grow and go in this world. And I don't know why we got so adrift in terms of education. I think that should be one of the things that hopefully someone in the offices should be talking about. I mean, we have people that go to college and college, they spend so much money in colleges doing things, but when their sink backs up, they don't have no idea how to show up. I'm one of those people too. And they have just basic knowledge they don't know about their own lives. And they take all these classes. And sometimes I think the 2-year community college is a heck of a lot better than these Harvard, Yale colleges. You start to know things a little bit more deep and things that you need to know. What do you think?
well, I didn't go to university, although I was lobbied. Princeton offered me a scholarship, and another university in Georgia. Um, I think it was in Athens, Georgia, now that I mention it. I didn't do that. I didn't want to spend another 3 or 4 years in a school. Frankly, I never wanted to have to get up in the morning and go to an office building either.
Hmm.
Sit there. I got up when I was a kid in school and went to school and sat there. I remember thinking, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. So I was fast, golf intrigued me anyhow. I thought this is my way out. I can walk around the golf course. It's a different life. And it opens other doors up. So I was able to spend a lot of time doing that. And it allowed me to think about other things. And our family environment had a lot of pretty active minds around in it that were talking about things like you just mentioned. So I heard that from childhood on, and so did my brother. We both pay attention to what's going on in the world.
Yeah,
What's,
yeah.
I mean, I don't get glued to the television set all day long to find out what's going on in the United States, Canada, or anywhere else. But you can pick certain news outlets and you get the basic picture.
Right.
And the amount of repetition in the news world is so frequent that you could never, I don't know how you would ever avoid knowing it, frankly.
That's true. I
You
have
could,
some, also wanted to tell you one of my quote ideas that I always have, that I try to give out to people. Hopefully they can make money on it, because like you, I write a lot of things and sometimes I can't pursue them. So me and you probably go back this time. There was a show called Candid Camera. Remember that?
yeah,
So I
yes.
think they should have candid camera toys. So the people could have their own life. They could have a little camera and they could film their family in these awkward situations, and like camera toys that, like the same way they used to do that show. That was one of the classic shows. And I think that people would have a lot more fun in their households and with their friends with candid camera toys. You know, that's that time period.
Well, everybody's, yeah, the Candid camera, I remember it. And now everybody's got a phone with a camera in it. So it's definitely possible to record things. I was playing something on my guitar a couple of days ago where I am right now in South Carolina. And my friend here turned her phone on and recorded some of it. So I listened to it, but there was definitely a day when you could not do that. And but now you can. And it's interesting. I mean, I play golf, but I have one song that I wrote. That I mean, I've got 7 or 8 songs now, but I wrote one song a couple or 3 years ago, um, called "Hey America," and it's in the audio book of my golf book
Hmm.
for a reason. The creative energy that's involved in conjuring up the image of the shot to be, that energy is really, you're using the power in the creation of thought when you create the image of the shot to be. When you write a song or you create something like I did that way, this song "Hey America," it's the same energy. I went to the same place in my own mind. Once I realized that that's what I was doing, and it didn't take long to figure it out. I used that energy to create the lyric for the song, and but then playing it and singing it, I'd never done that before. It took a bit of time, but once I figured out, I got the whole thing in my mind from one end to the other. Once I felt right, then I could pick the guitar up and I'd start to play the whole thing. If you've never done it before, to play this song, I think it's 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Initially, the 3 minutes and 20 seconds seemed like a long time. Play the guitar and sing the song. Now it doesn't matter. I
Mhm.
don't even think about that part of it. And but that creative energy fascinates me.
Yeah.
And I know that it's the same thing I use in writing. And actually, the song,
Bob,
hey,
if people want to know more about you and how they can read your books and all the stuff that you're doing, how can they know? Where can they see that?
well, you can find Hey America on YouTube. If you look up, how was it found? I found some people in a little pub in Florida wanted to hear it the other day before I left there. So we found it on a phone. Neil Young, uh, Hey America, Neil Young. Up it came, and then it said, Hey America, Young Bob and the Peterboroughs, which was the name of the band that I used
Hmm.
when I created the band, anyhow. And um, played the song. And Neil came along once I'd recorded it, which didn't take long, and he played a harmonica intro and sings some vocals in the song also. And I know a lot of really good musicians in the Southern Ontario area near Toronto, so it was easy for me to do that.
And
We did it.
how about your book? How can people see the book? Is your book out there?
Book, they can get it from Young Bob, or I'm sorry, bobyounggolf.com is the website. And any individuals listening to this show that are members of Neil Young Archives will be able to get it on Neil Young Archives also. But bobyounggolf.com is
Great.
the place to go to get the book and the audio book. And frankly, the audio book has got, I'm reading the text.
Right.
And my brother wrote a forward for it, so he reads his forward. And Barry Morrow, who wrote the script, was an Oscar-winning screenwriter for the script Rain Man. I know Barry, he's a friend. So Barry wrote he wrote a forward for it because he's working on a documentary on Mo Norman and possibly a feature film. There's people interested in this because
It's
it's a
great.
very good story. So Barry is reading his forward, my brother's reading his forward, and I'm reading the text of the book. And in the audio book is the song "Hey America." If you listen to it, the lyric was relevant when I wrote it 2.5 years ago, roughly,
Mhm.
of what's going on in the United States, and now it's even more relevant because of what's going on. And uh, it's I'm not attacking anybody in it. It's tame, but it's essentially saying, "Hey, America, give love a chance. You're the beacon of freedom. Set your liberty free." And
Yeah.
that idea is projected through the
I
song.
wanna end on a note which is similar to what we're talking about a little bit, which is a little bit with golf and everything else is the idea you mentioned about seeing that golf ball going in that hole, and the idea about target. There's a lot of things hitting you on all different sides in life and a
Yeah,
lot of negative energies that are bringing you down. And so people need to stay focused. They need to target their mind onto
right.
two things and keep their mind focused on the big picture, you might say. So that's like getting that hole in one or whatever. But keep your mind focused on the good things because I mean there's so much negative energy around the world and we need more
Yeah.
love and happiness wherever we are side. So I want to know that. Thank you, Bob, for joining us. It was a real pleasure meeting you. Tell your brother I say hi also. And all the best with your book and keep playing that golf. Maybe one day we'll play a little golf together.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
take a go.
Neil's out on the road doing a tour. Get in touch with Brigetta Tarmarcio. We'll make sure you come to a show.
Sounds good. Thank
All
you.
right.
Good one.
Okay. Good to talk to you
Good to talk
too.
to you. Thank you. Have a
All
great
right.
one. Bye-bye.
Thank you.